Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is headed to Capitol Hill today again to discuss the launch of a controversial project. Zuckerberg will testify before the House Financial Services Committee about Libra, the cryptocurrency project spearheaded by the social media giant. But that likely won't be the only issue that comes up during questioning. So CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe and CNET senior producer Dan Patterson, they both join us now to talk more about this. Dan, I'm going to start with you, though. We were just talking, and I said, I don't really know anyone who truly understands cryptocurrency, like really, and they can break it down to me in third grade level. So let's take a step back and talk to people about what Libra is.
Well, what I can't do this morning is break down the entirety of cryptocurrency.
Right.
What we can do is break down Libra, Facebook's proposed cryptocurrency. And I say Facebook, but it's actually overseen by a subsidiary of Facebook called the Libra Association, or it will be when it is launched in 2020. Based in Geneva, this association is like a third party that's meant to administrate and oversee the currency.
And so it's not without controversy, though. In fact, I think some partners have already pulled out. What are lawmakers most concerned about?
Well, they're concerned, and banks are concerned about a few things. Banks are concerned about Facebook's entrance into a market where they see themselves as kind of the gatekeepers to financial services by both business or for both businesses and consumers. So they see themselves not just as these gatekeepers, but stabilizers, right? Law enforcement agencies and governments are concerned about a couple things. One is regulation, making sure that Facebook isn't the only owner of this market. But two, law enforcement agencies are worried that ongoing investigations or where they use regular currencies to track, say, the sale of illicit weapons or sex trafficking, a lot of this might disappear into Facebook, and they wouldn't be able to do the same type of law enforcement work that they do now.
And I mentioned that there are partners that pulled out, partners that people would know that are sort of already kind of in this space, right? PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, but they're all pulling out. And the idea behind having the cryptocurrency linked to some of these well-known businesses in the financial service industry is that it would be more stable than some of these other cryptocurrencies that we don't know how their value is determined. But when I heard that these major partners were pulling out, I really thought that he wasn't going to go forward with this anymore. What's the concern here?
Well, so these financial organizations, and they kind of range from banks to, like you said, PayPal, so bank-like organizations that transact money. So they have expressed interest in a similar type of system, or that they, in theory, support cryptocurrencies and companies like Facebook involved with cryptocurrencies, but they have direct concerns about Facebook's ability to be in this market without Facebook themselves being regulated. There are other concerns as well, but really it just comes back to that big R word, which is regulation. With Facebook, there's tons of scrutiny, and all of these financial services organizations, which were really there to lend trust to the currency anyway, have said, let's maybe wait and see.
Yeah, and to that, we're going to pivot over to Ed, because Ed, Mark Zuckerberg has, periodically floated the idea of maybe government regulation would be a good thing for social media. You never know if he's really sincere about it. No doubt, cryptocurrency is only one of many issues lawmakers are going to want to talk to him about. What else do you think is going to be on the agenda today?
Absolutely, and like you and Marie, I'm glad Dan broke it down into plain English, because I was trying to understand what exactly Libra is and what it would do yesterday. So thank you for that, Dan. Zuckerberg's not the only tech executive actually that's called for more federal or government regulation. In fact, most of the guys from Silicon Valley have argued that the government should be far more involved in stepping in and figuring out sort of the parameters of what either applies as acceptable speech, or how far you can reach into somebody's life, the handling of privacy and other personal data. The problem is Congress never seems to act on it. And so they can continue to get called up here and berated by lawmakers, to which they turn around to the lawmakers and say, well, if you just do something about it, maybe we wouldn't have these kinds of conversations. He will get questions about cryptocurrency, because this is, as you can see there, the House Financial Services Committee. So they've called him in officially under the auspices of the Libra project. But he is also expected to get questions from the roughly 60 members of the committee about the decision by Facebook and Instagram to continue allowing political advertising that in some cases is misleading, has been proven false by fact checkers, Zuckerberg argues that tech companies shouldn't be the ones deciding what you can and cannot see on the internet, and that they have to allow for discourse, however factual or actual it is. But Democrats, of course, especially those running for president, have accused Facebook of essentially allowing the president to spread falsehoods about his potential opponents on Facebook and Instagram. Republicans also take issue with the company, and we're expecting to see some blowback from them as well. But one Republican senior aide we talked to raised some questions about what exactly the purpose of today's hearing is. Is it to talk about Libra? Is it to talk about election interference? Is it just to beat up on a very well-known tech executive? We'll see where it goes. We expect this could run most of the day, probably into the late afternoon.
Yeah, when you talk about election interference, that's one of the things that Facebook says that they have been working to combat. And you always got to wonder about the timing of things, because I think it was just a few days ago that they announced that they had pulled down a number of different pages that they said were part of a coordinated effort to mislead. There you go, misinformation, sort of coordinated effort. What else is Facebook doing in order to ensure that misinformation is not part of their platform?
Sure. Well, one thing they're doing is now requiring the curators of pages to more clearly identify who they are, what organization they're with, and maybe even the country of origin. They will also do that to try to identify information that may have been posted on Facebook by state-owned or state-operated entities, especially those from overseas. As you mentioned, they shut down a few different pages earlier this week run by Iranians and Russians, and a security firm that was hired by Facebook to look into this discovered that it looks like some either officials or some aspect of the Internet Research Agency, which was that St. Petersburg, Russia group that did a lot of the discrediting of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 cycle, was also doing it again, this time focused primarily at Joe Biden, but also to some extent Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. So there are some early, small examples of the same kind of interference we saw 4 years ago making its way onto Facebook, the platform now arguing that it's doing a better job to try to catch that before it becomes a bigger thing.
And Dan, one of the things they said they will not do is pull misleading political ads off of Facebook. And Elizabeth Warren a little bit trolled him a little bit by putting an ad up about him, and basically said, this is your policy. We can say anything we want. They've been criticized. Is there going to be any effort to sort of police that in any way? Or, how is Facebook responding?
Yeah, so when we think about the origins of false information, fake information, we can probably look at ourselves and say, oh, this is kind of like arguing at Thanksgiving over the kitchen table, right? You're just never going to change anyone's mind. So what Facebook and law enforcement agencies do instead is target networks. So we saw this in this very convenient announcement a few days ago where they said they took down, I like this euphemism that they use, coordinated inauthentic activity. I like that because it kind of encompasses a bunch of behaviors as opposed to focusing on maybe the editorial content. And they say this as well. They say, we don't want to focus on the editorial content. We want to find behavior. And it's that coordination where you have a political agenda or perhaps a business agenda, and you are using particular tactics to deceive the audience. That's the behavior Facebook is really looking at, and it seems to be effective in some instances.
Yeah, I like that phrasing too for some reason. Dan and Ed, thank you so much, gentlemen.
Good to see you.
So we are going to have live coverage of Zuckerberg's testimony later on this morning on CBSN. We will also be streaming the hearing on CBSNews.com if you prefer to watch the entire thing unedited.